life is not a straight line. It has its detours and stops and curves. So I would do that all over again because I learned a lot about myself and a lot about life. And I think I was able to bring that story to others because I was vocation director for a number of years. So I was able to share my story with people and realize, I think it helped them to realize it's not just a straight line of simplicity, that it has its complexities.
Welcome to Sharing Our Marianist Stories, a podcast produced by the North American Center for Marianist Studies in Dayton, Ohio. I'm Mike Bennett, Media Administrator for NACMS. You're probably recognizing that I am not Gabby Bibeau. Gabby has since moved on from NACMS to pursue doctoral studies, and within the past 2 months, I have started as NACMS's media administrator, overseeing all of our audio and video production, including our website, social media accounts, newsletter, and all things tech for NACMS. I'm excited to be part of the team, and I'm looking forward to continuing to get my bearings in this new role. In today's episode, I'm excited to share with you a little bit of the story of Brother Jesse O'Neill, who is currently serving as the head of education on the Provincial Council, living in St. Louis, Missouri, and has been a professed brother for over 25 years.
I'm Brother Jesse O'Neill. I live right now in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm presently on the Provincial Council for the Marianist province of the United States as the assistant for education for the past 5 years.
What does the commitment being on the Provincial Council look like?
The Provincial Council has a lot of things on its agenda. We're in a time in religious life where there's a lot of giftedness and joy for the future, but also a lot of challenges. So there are tough decisions that need to be made, in this time in history. And I think we do pretty well as a group in that we don't always necessarily agree at the start of a conversation, but we can land at a place where everyone feels comfortable. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So we can almost finish each other's sentences now because we know each other so well. And then we have 2 new people on the council this year. We're starting a new term. We had our assembly a few weeks ago, and that assembly had an installation ceremony where we were able to install the new provincial council. So the core 5 were reappointed for another 3 years, and then the 2 new council members joined us. So we meet this coming week for our planning days to map out the year and years ahead.
And what is your role on the council?
I'm assistant for education, which is probably the largest umbrella of facets of all the council members. So I have the 3 universities, the high schools, the archives, NACMS, the Leadership Development Office, the Association of Marianist Universities. So there's a lot of pieces to it. So when I started, I was like, what the heck? It's a lot. But you know what? If you have really good people in place, because I'm not a micromanager, so I trust people in the good work that they do.
Tell me about your journey with the Marianists.
I met the Marianists as a direct result of my father's death. When I was in high school, he died very suddenly. My family was living in Florida at the time, and we moved up outside Philadelphia in Chester, Pennsylvania, with my grandmother who lived down the street from this school that was run by the Marianists. And I wasn't saying this at the time, but I can look back and say that what attracted me to them was their joy. Like they truly loved what they were doing, and I was attracted, to that. And so that became a long journey of discernment, and went to college and was a contact. And then I became an aspirant, the 2 years after college, but then I left at the end of the 2 years. And the way I describe it to people is that I wanted to be at happy hour with the teachers and not at mass with the brothers when I was in my early 20s. Then I got older, I realized you could do both. If you just like balance things in life, So I left for 5 years, never with the intention of coming back. And then it ran full circle and came back. I did the aspirancy again and celebrated 25-year jubilee a couple years ago. And I do all that over again. I don't see having left and coming back as a mistake by any means. I think life is not a straight line. It has its detours and stops and curves. So I would do that all over again because I learned a lot about myself and a lot about life. And I think I was able to bring that story to others because I was vocation director for a number of years. So I was able to share my story with people and realize, I think it helped them to realize it's not just a straight line of simplicity, that it has its complexities. Well, when I got the phone call from Father Oscar to take this gig that I'm in now, I was presently at Mother Seton Academy in Baltimore, Maryland, where I was for 15 years. That was a place where it transformed my life. Because as much as you try to be the teacher, these young people taught me every day. They taught me about resilience, about fortitude, about perseverance, faith. So it was a hard place to leave, but I knew it was the right decision. And I still go back and, visit a lot.
So I don't know much about Mother Seton. Can you tell me just a little bit about the school?
Sure. Back in the 1990s, when the Archbishop of Baltimore closed many of the inner city Catholic schools, 6 religious congregations came together and said, what can we do to respond to this reality? So ourselves, the Zavarian Brothers, the Daughters of Charity, Immaculate Heart of Mary, the Franciscan Sisters, and the Daughters of Charity came together and formed this mosaic and said, we're going to start a school for students in the city of Baltimore, recognizing their potential and their capacity for success. And so in 1992, the school began. Small class size, only 15 boys, 15 girls in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And we work really hard at getting them into a Catholic or private high school. And we have somebody on staff that works with them through high school and hopefully getting them into a college. I'm very sensitive to how we, for lack of a better word, market the mission of these schools. We have a program at 4 of our schools that used to be called the Marianist Urban Students Program. And about a year and a half ago, the director of our school, St. Mary's here in St. Louis, I was meeting with him and the principal and president about the program. And he looked at me and he said, Brother Jesse, have you ever thought about changing the name of the program? And I said, talk to me, Troy. And he said, Marianist Urban Students Program. He said, the use of the word urban is coded language for poor Black kid. Long story short, through a long discernment process, we renamed the program now EXCEL, EXCEL, which is an acronym for Excellence in Character, Education, and Leadership. And it speaks to the core values of the program. And it also speaks to, as I said earlier, about the potential and the capacity of these students. So I'm really big on the marketing tools, the things that we put out in print, that we don't come out and say we're helping the poor kids, that we're helping young women and men who have the capacity to thrive, period.
As vocation director and at Mother Seton, do you see ways that experience really helped you formulate or impacted your style of leadership?
For sure. I'm a believer that a successful person surrounds themselves with successful people, and that if you have those people around you and there is a level of trust between you and that there's a relationship. For me, Marianist leadership is all about relationship. If you have a relationship that's healthy and honest, and I'm not talking about a kumbaya kind of a relationship where we always get along, but we can be honest with each other, even disagree with each other, but in a respectful way. And then good is going to come from that. So that is how I was a vocation director. That's how I led at Mother Seton when I would mentor teachers and work with the leadership team of the school. And it certainly plays itself out now, in my role because it's such a huge umbrella. I have a hard time sometimes just keeping hold of everything. So,
if you had to put a couple key phrases or key terms to Marianist leadership for you, would there be like one or two?
Relationship. And one of our characteristics of Marianist education, adaptation and change, comes to mind. I think as a Marianist leader, you have to adapt to the circumstance, to the person, to the parent, to the student that is in front of you at that moment. And we experienced that to the nth degree through COVID. Talk about an opportunity to really embrace that characteristic.
Yeah.
So I think those are. There are other things too, but those are two important pieces. And the relationship part is what I said earlier. If you have a relationship that's built on mutual trust, of gifts and talents, then people are going to respond, to that. That's kind of like my deep philosophy.
And what would be a hope you have for the Marianist family?
My hope for the Marianist family is that we would increase in our ways to collaborate. I met last week with the Office of Sponsorship. That's an office within my Office of Education. And they're the front line, if you will, with all of the high schools. And we met for 3 days and brainstormed. And one of the things I presented to them was looking at ways that MLCNA could assist us in our work, because I think often we can get, as much as we say we're a family, and I think our intentions are good, but we can get siloed, very easily into the brothers doing their thing, the sisters. And I think we're continuing to grow in that area, but I think there's more we can do to collaborate. That's my hope for the Marianist family, is that we look at creative ways to help each other. And I really feel very confident that that's going to happen.
Before this recording, you were mentioning a little bit about the Mary's Lead program. I was curious if you could talk a little bit about what is Mary's Lead? Yeah.
So, we have lots of, Marianist leaders in our schools. The majority of them are lay people, and it's a program, it's a 1-year program that really deepens our school leaders' understanding of not only what it means to be a principal, what it means to be a president, or what it means to be in some mid-level leadership role, but how do you lead in a Marianist way? What are the skills? What are the behaviors that make you, in the eyes of others, and the way you operate and what people perceive, they see you as a Catholic and Marianist leader. So we had the inaugural cohort of the program that began in February of 2020. It's composed of a monthly online engagement and then a mid-year retreat, more monthly engagements, and then a closing retreat. So we were able to do that. We had 12 participants in cohort 1, 16 in cohort 2, and then our dream always, without COVID having interfered, was to have one cohort end when another cohort began and they would be together. And that finally happened this past June. The end of cohort 2, the start of cohort 3. Dr. Savio Franco, who is the director of our leadership development program under my office, he's the brainchild brainchild of this. I ride on his coattail. He developed the program. He organizes the program, gives great thought and energy to it. And I think it really has impacted, our leaders. Now we have more mid-level folks, that come. One of the inherent challenges of all of this, though, and we talked about this a lot at our Office of Sponsorship meetings, the days when somebody was at a school and they're there, until they retire are over. We get a fair amount of turnover. So somebody who went through cohort 1, good people, committed, educators, and now they've left. And sometimes it's because of family circumstances or money or whatever. And so we talked about how we can't allow that to deter us or, discourage us. It's a reality of our world today, and we just have to keep at it and keep inviting and keep forming. Because our belief, I said to them at our meetings, has to be that even though they go off somewhere, that we have to believe that what we gave them lives on wherever they are and whatever they're doing. That, I think, helps keeps us sane.
Well, in the least, you're empowering people to take the charism into the world, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Don't hit that stop button yet. Before we ask Brother Jesse our final question, I would just like to offer a word of thanks to Brother Jesse for sharing his Marianist story with us. And a word of thanks to you, our listener, for listening to this episode of Sharing Our Marianist Stories and for your continued support of the North American Center for Marianist Studies. Make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts so that you'll be notified when we have future episodes released. And follow us on our social media accounts at This Is NACMS on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube so that you have access to our ongoing educational and formational content focused on our Marianist family, history, and charism. And now to wrap up this episode of Sharing Our Marianist Story, we return with our final question. So we know the founders communicated a lot through letters. Mm-hmm. So if you were going to write a letter to someone, dead or alive, knowing you were guaranteed a response, who would you write to and what would be the topic?
Could be anybody. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a great question. There is just some, Marianist heroes that I have, both living and deceased. But there are some that are still alive that I just respect immensely. And I hope they know that because I've told them in so many words over the years. But Father Pat Tonry, who is now out at our healthcare center at Cupertino, when I talked about what attracted me years ago when I was in high school was the joy. Well, he is emblematic of that, and I have such utter respect and love for him. I lived with him all the years that I worked at Mother Seton. I lived at our parish out in Eldersburg, Maryland, which is like an hour outside of the city, long commute. And St. Joseph's was the parish that we had. We have since left there. And he was the pastor for the initial years when I was there. And he was just, needless to say, the parishioners just loved. And there's just one moment when he was giving a homily and he's standing in the front and he says, I challenge any person in this church right now, if you believe that Jesus would be for the death penalty, to come up right now and stand next to me. And you could hear a pin, you could hear a pin drop, and I'm looking around and no one moved, and he continued in his homily. When we got home, I said to him, what would have you done? He walked up, he said, I would have crapped myself. That provocative kind of delivery where he just really touched people's heart, both on the altar and more importantly, off the altar.